Hello and welcome to Decoding the New Economy. Today I'm joined by Peter Coffey, VP of Salesforce Strategic Research. We're going to talk about some of the trends and where the future's going for both Salesforce, the Internet of Things, and business in general.
Absolutely.
Peter, thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you. I'm glad you were able to be here for our little gathering this week.
A little gathering indeed.
Which we are now actually using the expression, the world's largest software conference. We've decided it's time to say, yep, we're confident of that number being achieved this week.
Well, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that. Okay, so first of all, kick off your role as VP for Strategic Research. What does that involve?
My job was actually created about 6.5 years ago when, after early success talking to everybody except the IT department in an organization, we realized that if you were to take the top layers of CRM functionality and other specific capability off the top of the stack that we had built and expose that stack to developers, they could really build just about anything on that. And that rather involved having completely new conversations with independent software developers, with enterprise developers, and with the IT departments who manage corporate portfolios. And my job was created to be the person who would have those conversations that we never had before, do the competitive research in spaces where we really had not been a competitor before. And of course, since that time, the Salesforce platform has grown to comprise Force.com, Heroku, the Exact Target Fuel combination, and it's been used to build millions of applications.
Right. So part of your role then is to look at those market opportunities and see where Salesforce can drop into that particular segment in the marketplace.
Well, you know, it's my job to understand, given all the obvious reasons why you would adopt a cloud-based platform, what are the issues, either of perception or reality, that are preventing people from treating that as their new normal?
Right.
And then if it's an educational issue, to try to help provide illumination on issues. And if it's an issue where there's something that we just didn't really appreciate about the requirements of a developer community, then we need to make sure that those are addressed. And so it's a lot of listening. And then I come back to headquarters and I say, okay, marketing, this is what I learned that's relevant to you guys. Product design, this is what I learned that's relevant to you guys. And oh, by the way, this customer is now completely understanding what we want to do and they want to go completely wall to wall. So sales, follow up. That's kind of my world.
Right. So what do you see is the new normal of business?
Mobile.
Right.
The fundamental statement is your mobile device is no longer an accessory. It's the first thing you reach for in the morning. It's the last thing you'll touch at night. It is increasingly the focus of your attention for most of the day, with the laptop occasionally being used to author, creative work like a presentation, or to deal with something that needs a large screen like a big pipeline analysis or whatever. But fundamentally, people are mobile centric, and that means that they need a new way of thinking about their applications. The desktop metaphor is, after all, 32 years old, and shrinking the desktop to the size of your hand was never something that anyone actually asked people to do.
Right.
It was something that vendors tried to do because it was what they thought they could do. We never came into the world with that preconception, and we said, look, what does the mobile user need? What they need is not 5 different applications to talk about the sales status of a customer, the orders in process status, the service calls status, and the deal status. No. They need to open a customer object and say, okay, here's everything I need to know about the customer I'm going to see 5 minutes from now.
Right.
And when we've delivered this week the container for that, we feel that we've accomplished maybe the first fundamental transition away from the desktop that we've dealt with for these 30 years, and say the new metaphor is the container in which all of the assets and processes that are relevant to the moment you're in are here for you in a way that includes your own stuff, your supply chain and partners stuff, your customers' interactions with you, third-party applications, all just there doing what you need to do.
Yeah. So this is Salesforce 1.
Precisely.
It
is.
So how do you see that developing with things, with the Internet of Machines, for instance, where you're plugging into devices and that the supply chain that you've spoken about there?
Yeah. Connecting devices is an extraordinary thing, because if you think about it, it takes things that we used to think we understood and really turns them inside out. Service used to be an act of damage control.
Right.
The customer has noticed a problem. You are bleeding brand equity with that customer until that problem's resolved, and you want to fix it as quickly as you can. If you are working with connected products, you can identify behaviors across the entire population of those products long before the behaviors become gross enough to be a
Right.
symptom that bothers the customer. And you can proactively reach out to a customer and say, you probably haven't noticed anything, but we'd like to come by and do a little calibration on your device anytime in the next 3 days at your convenience.
Right.
Wow, that's not service, that's customer care. That's positive brand equity creation instead of just trying to minimize the bleeding.
Right.
And that changes the definition of service. Another fundamental change that's happened is that the connectivity of the customer is such that if you have a customer who's unhappy with you for even 5 or 10 minutes, there's a tweet or a Facebook post or something, or a LinkedIn update just begging to leak out there and damage your brand.
Yes.
The closer you can get to instantaneous resolution of the issue, the better. And that's why service has to operate at a velocity and with an agility that previously was not required. And then finally, here's the other thing. There's research now that's come out of places like MIT that shows traditional print and broadcast media are still valuable for creating awareness of your brand, but that the final step of turning someone from knowing who you are to deciding to do business with you is now made today only when a trusted network confirms it.
Right.
Whether that's Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, people don't make that final step of, now I'm going to do business with you guys, until they've had the opportunity to consult trusted advisors. Now what that means is this: your current customers must be continually refreshed in their delight
Right.
in being your customer if you want them to be the active voice for you that has to be out there to complete that process of creating new customers for you. If you do not have delighted customers, you have no marketing
Yeah.
in the world that we're in today. And the way that you delight customers is making sure that every interaction with you leaves them happier than they were before that they are doing business with you. So the traditional silos of sales, service, support, marketing, those absolutely must be dissolved into one new entity, which is proactive customer connection.
So that's the new normal, really.
It must be.
Yeah.
And companies that neglect to adopt it will discover that the only customers they still have are the ones who are sensitive to nothing but price,
Right.
and whose loyalty is no more lasting than the next cents off coupon from some other provider, and that small companies are able to take away a tiny fraction of their volume but take away a substantial fraction of their profits.
Yeah.
Because they will take the customers who do value that engagement and are willing to pay for it. And research from places like American Express has demonstrated that the fraction of the market that willingly chooses to pay an above market price for a superior service experience is actually growing over time.
That's a good point.
It is. Yeah.
Now, with the Internet of Everything, where do you see security issues in this?
Oh, it's tremendously important that if you're going to connect devices and measure people's use of your product, that you treat that information as tremendously sensitive. Because after all, if I make a billing error and I take some of your money, I can give it back. If I make any kind of data privacy error and leak or abuse information about your personal history, your medical status, your lifestyle, I'm sorry, I can't make good on that. I can't repair that. Any effort to repair it will just magnify the problem.
Sure.
Right? And so the notion of moving beyond a traditional view of security to a much more strategic understanding of trust is absolutely critical to this. And what that means is a couple of things. There needs to be no doubt in the customer's mind that they own their information. There needs to be complete understanding of what you're authorizing someone to do with the information that you voluntarily give. And here's also a key finding from research. People react with tremendous hostility to any sensation that information has been used without their consent.
Right.
But they're tremendously ready to share information the moment that they perceive reciprocal value for that act of sharing.
Yeah.
So if you're clear with people and say, we'd like to do X, Y, and Z for you. To do X, we would need this. To do Y, we would also need a little bit more from you. And to do Z, we would need permission to monitor, your use of your product. But here's what we'll give you in return. There's abundant evidence that people respond to that with pleasure, even delight if it's done well. And the result can be a tremendous increase in brand equity and a reduction of the likelihood that people will switch to a substitutable product. Because
Yes.
products can be substituted, but when you have a service relationship with a provider, well, that makes it much less likely that someone's just going to say, well, I can just throw away this camera, buy this camera. Yeah, well, this camera came with my subscription to their photo advisory service, where every month I get a little notation from a professional photographer saying, okay, you allowed us to review some of your photos, and here's some tips we think you might like, and by the way, this lens that we have would handle a situation that you seem to be trying and struggling to capture. Think about that. Think about the opportunity for a company to be continuing that post-sale process of, we want you to have a great experience with the product.
So, Peter, to finish up, what would you recommend for a business that want to take advantage of these opportunities? What are the steps they should take?
The most important thing is to be prepared to start with a blank sheet of paper on what it is you're selling.
Right.
It's terribly easy to think that your go-to-market is your product. If you can say, what need are we trying to meet? How are people meeting that need today? What do they find very frustrating about that? And how can we solve that problem? Not necessarily with a better, faster, cheaper version of the products that exist, but maybe a different conception of what the product needs to be.
Well, Peter, that's great advice. Thank you very much for that.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for joining on Decoding the New Economy.